Session 29, Giants, Part 2. Now, as we did last week, we start with that text from Genesis chapter 6, where it says, "The sons of God, whoever they might be, saw the daughters of men, took wives, and begat the Nephilim, or giants." Genesis 6. Now, the Huns were known, the Huns, of course, who invaded through Europe in the Middle Ages. They were known to have those elongated skulls that are being found sometimes in the American digs when they find the skeletons of the precursors to the Indian races. And these elongated skulls are also sometimes found in the Egyptian digs. And it's interesting that the Huns, who come out of Asia, also had some of the elongated skulls. And they were said to be descended from the giants as well. Prince Leonello and Princess Desta, a 14th century Italian noble family from Rome, are said to act as a hub for all Illuminati bloodlines. They both possess the Boskop skulls, these elongated ones that are found among the remains of human progenitors. And it's the same kind of skulls that are found in the giants that are found in Antarctica, it's claimed, in the ruins that were found there recently. The elongated skulls are considered to be the pre-Adamic race, and they are the same royal class of Egypt that traces its origins to the stars. That is, the Egyptians believed themselves to be descended from a different race to the Adamic one. Well, it's a hard claim to make because the flood, of course, got rid of everybody, and everybody after the flood came out of Noah, so their claim certainly seems rather odd. Anyway, these creatures have the same small ribbed shape as the pre-Adamites of Antarctica, and so with the long head comes a kind of a narrow rib cage and a kind of a tapered shape. They don't have that broad-shouldered look of even modern man. Now let's look at some of the skeletons that have been found around the place. We'll sort of continue some of our information from last week. Now, November 21st in 1856, the New York Times, a skeleton was found of size 10 foot 9 inches. And we're talking here about finds in America. And also toward the more modern day. Now, this picture on the left, I think, certainly part of it is photoshopped because if a skull like that really was laying under the road, I think the people that made the road in the first place probably would have stumbled on it then. But certainly the size of the skulls is in keeping with the size of the giants that are reported. I think the picture on the right is genuine. December 25th, 1868, a water company dug up the bones of a giant. The bones of an 11-foot giant weighed 264.25 pounds, just the bones. So the body probably weighed in at about 900 pounds or 440 kilograms. September the 8th, 1871, in the New York Times, giant skulls where bone was about an inch thick. It's pretty thick. February 8th, 1876, New York Times, 3 skeletons were found all about 9 feet in height. And August the 10th, 1880, New York Times again, skeletons found of height 11 foot 3. May the 25th, 1882, the first of a series of 60-foot diameter mounds was found across Ohio, but these mounds have been found in Ohio, Wisconsin, West Virginia, California, New York State, and even Catalina Island, and they're still being excavated to the modern day. The one in each mound basically can hold up to 60 skeletons at a time. Now, the mounds in the Santa Catalina Islands contained skeletons of giants that were up to 6 times the height of modern humans. The same island has nearly 4,000 skeletons there, most of which measure in the range between 7 and 9 feet in height. But of course, there were some there that were in the range of 30 to 40 feet in height. Now, Irish and Scottish reports of the same period also speak of the bones of 12-foot giants. A cave in Mexico contained over 200 skeletons of giants all of them over 9 feet tall. And we're going to show you an image in a moment of a single finger that was produced by a grave robber who wouldn't say where the rest of the body was. The flesh is still on the finger. It was hacked off by a grave robber and has a length that indicates its owner was about 25 feet tall, if not more, depending on how one reckons the measurement. But some people even think the finger is from a giant that could have been as much as 36 feet tall. And in fact, I think there are actually 2 fingers out there doing the rounds. Now, could this giant finger be from the missing mummy of Osiris? Because when Osiris's tomb was found, the excavators believed that the body that was in it was not the original body, but that the original body had been stolen away. Perhaps these parts are from that stolen body. And here's an image of it. Now, the Egyptian money at the bottom, I should point out, is quite a large note they have there, like the old New Zealand notes and like the British pounds. So that note there is only a little bit bigger than the last joint of the finger. You can see the fingernail at the right hand end there. Judging by that, that finger alone is probably 12 to 15 inches long. Now, Cap d'Oie was a 2-headed 12-foot-plus Patagonian giant that was displayed by P.T. Barnum as part of his circus and objects of interest that he used to go around touring and showing people. And apparently this 2-headed giant was captured and imprisoned in the bowels of a Spanish ship back in 1673. Now, it was during an escape attempt that he was spared and he subsequently died. That's the story that was circulated, but a second story says he was simply found dead on a beach with a spear through him. Well, I think the first story sounds more likely, but he spent time in various museums before being returned to America and being bought by the P.T. Barnum, let's call it circus, for showing around the country. And there's a shot of the head of the giants, or giant with 2 heads. A particular interest is Cardinal Pedro Crespi, who collected many artifacts from the South American, north end of South America, the sort of Central American area, among which is this crown which belonged to a king of the area at an earlier time. Look at the size of that crown that was sitting on the forehead of a king. Person wearing that would have to be in the vicinity of, well, I don't know, 20 feet tall, I would imagine. And there's at least a dozen more reports about giants found around America before 1920. Now let's go back and remind ourselves where all of these giants actually came from. Now, the fall of man occurs in generation 6, not generation 1. That's the first correction we made. And the fall of the angels followed the fall of man very quickly, and also therefore occurred in generation 6 of humanity. And it possibly occurred at the instigation of the now dying human women. It may have been an attempt actually to regain the lost immortality that the expulsion from Eden had caused. The women may have had an idea in their head that marrying the angels could maybe regain that lost immortality. Now, the Watchers, which the New Testament calls angels, had lived with human beings for a long time already, on this reckoning nearly 900 years, to teach them everything they needed about life in their world. So they were the very first teachers of mankind. But according to the book of Enoch, there were 200 angels that formed a pack, and they decided or agreed to take human women as wives and to beget children with them. So these angels beget children. And here's a few of these rock drawings. You can see small people and very big people there. And some people, the old archaeologists, used to think that the figures that were really important were drawn big, but it's seeming to be the case nowadays as we look at it with a second look, that in fact some of these very large figures were indeed very large. They were actually giants. And when we go back and look at a lot of the old pictures, we can see that there is actually evidence of giants staring us in the face. Now, the angels beget children, and these are called, in the Bible, the mighty men, men of renown. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, according to Genesis 6. Now, the word Nephilim is an interesting one. It kind of has different shades of meaning, but generally it's understood at a very sort of common level to mean the giants. Now, it's probably best understood with the book of Enoch, the Septuagint and New Testament writers like Peter, that these were the offspring of the illicit union of those watchers and the women. So the half angelic, half human children were the Nephilim. And it turns out that those Nephilim, those giants, were also the first human kings. They built the mysterious early megalithic cities, which people are always wondering, how did the people do it? Well, the giants were powerful. They had the ability to actually carry some of these things that human beings can't carry. And early kings were depicted as giants. Archaeologists not believing in giants put this down to the symbolic representation of royal status and not to the actual physical status, as I mentioned. But here we see an Assyrian image, and you see the normal-sized humans at the left. I'm not sure what the little humans under the seat of the big guy are supposed to be, but certainly the big guy there, which is he's holding a sort of a whip thing in his hand. He seems to be the boss, but he is at least 3 or 4 times taller and certainly about 10 times heavier than any of the human beings there, which would make him certainly 25 to 30 feet tall already, just from that sketch there. Now, the illustration above, well, that we just saw, gives an idea of the actual size difference between the king and his subjects. It's not an artistic exaggeration. The king or queen is on a throne and in a palace, as depicted by the pillars of his house. I'll bring it back. She wears a turban. That's a king's dress. Something like a water clock or an electrostatic generator is running in the center. In the king's hand is what looks like a rolled up flagellum. This serves as a mark of authority, but shows he's also a hard taskmaster. The servants appear to be bringing him something like an offering and a daily report. The writing, no doubt, tells us more, if we could read it. Now, sometimes the Satanists will claim that the God of Genesis was actually, he made Adam and Eve to be his slaves, but it turns out here that the giants who were born of the sin between the angels and women, they seem to be the ones who are acting in this way, not the God who made Adam and Eve. Now, Enoch chapter 9, then Michael and Gabriel, Raphael, Suriel, and Uriel looked down from heaven. And I should note here there are 7 archangels mentioned in the writings of the Jews, and here we have already 5 of them together. Suriel is also sometimes called Serial, with S-E-R-I-A-L, but it's the same person. They looked down from heaven and saw the quantity of blood that was shed on earth, and all the iniquity which was done upon it, and said one to another, it is the voice of their cries. The earth, deprived of her children, has cried even to the gate of heaven. And now to you, O you most holy one of heaven, the souls of men complain, saying, obtain justice for us from the Most High. And then they said to their Lord the King, you are Lord of lords, God of gods, King of kings. You have made all things, you possess power over all things. You have seen what Azazel has done, how he has taught every species of iniquity upon earth, and has disclosed to the world all the secret things which are done in the heavens. Samjaza also has taught sorcery. I should point out here that Semiazas, Semjaza, Semyaza, they're all the same character, just with small variations in the spelling. But of course we are reading here in translation, but it's the same person. Semyaza also has taught sorcery, to whom you have given authority over those who are associated with him. And they have gone together to the daughters of men, have lain with them. And here we have a straight statement that, in fact, they had sexual relations with the women, and it's not just some kind of injection or artificial insemination. They have become polluted and have revealed sins to them. The women likewise have brought forth giants. Thus has the whole earth been filled with blood and with iniquity. And now, behold, the souls of those who are dead cry out. So obviously there was a lot of bloodshed as these characters came to power. And they complain even to the gate of heaven. Their groaning ascends, nor can they on earth escape from the unrighteousness which is committed. You know all things before they exist. You know these things, and what has been done by them, Yet you do not speak to us. What, on account of these things, ought we to do to them? Enoch chapter 19. Then Uriel said, Here the angels who cohabited with women appointed their leaders. And having numerous forms of appearance, notice that we have a reference here to sort of shape-shifting, that they can keep on changing the way they appear to people. They made men profane and caused them to err, so that they sacrifice to devils as to gods. For in the great day there shall be a judgment until they are consumed, and their wives also shall be judged, who led astray the angels of heaven. You see that the women here seem to have enticed the angels. It's not the angels that seem to entice the women. So they who led astray the angels of heaven, that they might salute them. And I, Enoch, I alone saw the likeness of the end of all things, nor did any human being see it as I saw it. In Enoch chapter 8. Moreover, Azazel, now Azazel is another name for Semjaza, or Semi-Azaz, by the way. It's the same character. Moreover, Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields, breastplates, the fabrication of mirrors, and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, the use of paint, the beautifying of the eyebrows, the use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and all sorts of dyes, so that the world became altered. Impiety increased, fornication multiplied, and they transgressed and corrupted all their ways. Amazarach taught all the sorcerers and dividers of roots. Amers taught the solution of sorcery. Bakael taught the astrologers. Akibeel taught signs. Tamiel taught astronomy. And Asaradel taught the motion of the moon. And men, being destroyed, raised their voices to heaven. So the angels seem to have taught men how to make weapons of war. They seem to have taught women how to look gorgeous and attractive, so that men were allured toward them, and so that fornication then broke out. And taught men sorceries and divining to spirits, which is bringing them, of course, into idolatry and the occult. Now, many of the angels are bound under the 7 peaks of Mount Vernon in Antarctica. Also, it's believed. 1 Enoch 18, 8 through 16 reads as follows, and we can sort of see where it comes from. Now, I perceived at the extremity of the earth the firmament of heaven above it, and then I passed on towards the south. So it's the extremity of the earth, and Enoch is travelling south, where burnt, both by day and night, 6 mountains formed of glorious stones, 3 towards the east and 3 towards the south. Those which were towards the east were of a variegated stone, one of which was of margarite and another of antimony. Those toward the south were of a red stone. The middle one reached to heaven like the throne of God, a throne composed of alabaster, the top of which was of sapphire. I saw 2 a blazing fire hanging over all the mountains. And there I saw a place on the other side of an extended territory where waters were collected. I likewise beheld terrestrial fountains, deep in the fiery columns of heaven. And in the columns of heaven I beheld fires which descended without number, but neither on high nor into the deep. Over these fountains also I perceived a place which had neither the firmament of heaven above it, nor the solid ground underneath it. Neither was there water above it, nor anything on wing, but the spot was desolate. And there I beheld 7 stars, which like great blazing mountains, and like spirits entreating me. Then the angel said, This place, until the consummation of heaven and earth, will be the prison of the stars and the host of heaven. The stars which roll over fire are those which transgressed the commandment of God before their time arrived, for they came not in their proper season. Therefore was he offended with them and bound them until the period of the consummation of their crimes in the secret year. Well, it's pretty mysterious language, but there are a few clues there as to whereabouts this place is. Now, Enoch 100 verses 1 to 4 tells us that these stars are the transgressing angels, and they are bound in the earth, awaiting final sentencing. until 70 generations more have passed. Now, bear in mind this happened in the 7th generation. And so they're condemned in the days of Enoch, the 7th from Adam. Their judgment will be declared in the generation of Jesus Christ, who is the 77th from Adam, which is 70 generations later. And Jesus does appear indeed in the 77th generation, according to the genealogy in Luke 3. This generation should have seen the everlasting consummation of Daniel 9, but the Daniel 9 prophecy stops in the 69th week, and a 2,000-year insertion appears instead, being the age of the gospel and the time of the Gentiles. The sacrificial death of Jesus is announced in the spirit realm in that 77th generation. The transgressing angels know now that their fate is sealed. Other disobedient human spirits from the world of Noah get to hear the gospel, according to 1 Peter 3:18-20. Now, as per the book of Enoch, the angels will finally be led out to public judgment. It won't be a thing that we don't see, it will be a thing that we do see. Daniel's prophecy at that time, Daniel's prophecy says that at that time a final great desolator is to be loosed against Israel for its sins. And this is the very same time that Satan is loosed from his chains, as described in Revelation 20. Satan will take all others like him, whether they are fallen angels or evil spirits, as explained in Enoch 15, or sinners, to the same fate. That is, the sinners share the fate of these fallen angels. Enoch 15 explains the origin of evil spirits. It speaks there of the spirits of the giants that were killed, that are locked in the earth realm and wander around looking for comfort in bodies of flesh. The mark of the beast is a mark of identification with Satan and the fallen angels. The last Antichrist is going to be the sum and the embodiment of all Antichrists who have ever gone before him. His reign of 42 months, or 1260 days, or 3.5 years, identifies him as the desolator whose reign occupies the second half of Daniel 9's 70th week. There's some thoughts to dwell on. The fallen angels, in fact, are still alive. The giants might have been killed, but the fallen angels were not destroyed. They're still alive. And they have dwelling places that are separated from the human realm. They're not supposed to interfere with this realm in this era, but it seems that the occultists may have found ways to maybe contact them. The places they were sent away to in separation from us include, for instance, the ocean depths, underground caverns, and the outer cosmos. Could even include the moon or Mars, for instance. All of these places are well away from us so that we can't be influenced by them. Now, although I'm a little afraid to lead you down one of those endless rabbit holes, I think I'll risk playing a couple of videos here for you about moon discoveries. Both are by now copies of copies, perhaps of copies again, because they've been reloaded on the web several times after being removed each time. Now, other YouTubers then copy them and reload them again, so the quality does decrease. This multiple copying will account for a certain amount of picture graininess, but I think you can still see quite a bit in these videos I'm going to show you. What the first video purports to show is Apollo 11's Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin as they walk around through ruins of a large complex on the moon. This was, of course, not made public in the 60s. And it looks as if this complex has been attacked at some time in the past with perhaps missiles or bombs. It certainly is sort of quite wrecked. The second video films a second complex also found on the moon. So let's have a look at those two videos, each of which is sort of about 5 to 7 minutes in length each.
Verdadero objetivo de Apolo 11. La secreta razón que impulsó a los militares a conquistar la Luna. Esta fue la verdad, la única y secreta verdad. Aquel 21 de julio de 1969, Armstrong y Aldrin se alejaron escasos metros del módulo, filmando esta increíble construcción. Esta película de 14 minutos jamás fue difundida por NASA. Mirlo Rojo fue uno de los pocos norteamericanos que tuvo acceso a ella. A escasos metros, sí, del Águila. Y no fue casualidad. Todo estaba minuciosamente programado. Estas misteriosas ruinas, como otras igualmente filmadas por los restantes Apolos, habían sido fotografiadas con anterioridad por las diferentes sondas automáticas. Una de ellas, la Surveyor 5, lanzada el 8 de septiembre de 1967, fue decisiva. Alunizó en el Mar de la Tranquilidad, muy cerca de esta construcción, enviando 19.000 fotografías. Edificios en ruinas. Edificios en la superficie de la Luna. Edificios aparentemente de una gran antigüedad. Pero, ¿quién los había levantado? Nosotros los humanos, obviamente no. Solo quedaba una respuesta. Esto era obra de una civilización no humana. Los militares habían satisfecho la primera parte de su diabólico plan. Ahora quedaba la segunda. Según mi confidente, los astronautas procedieron a lo programado. Recogieron muestras de los muros, tomaron medidas y se retiraron. La insólita construcción, muy parecida a un hangar, medía 60 metros de longitud con una altura máxima en los muros de 9 metros. Presentaba 12 huecos o ventanas y una especie de puerta frontal de 5 metros de fondo por 3 de altura. Según los análisis practicados en la Tierra, el material con el que había sido construido era similar al de la superficie lunar. Un 60% de los átomos era oxígeno, con un 0,01% del peso constituido por hidrógeno. Las paredes se hallaban muy erosionadas. Esta circunstancia, dado que en la Luna no existe prácticamente atmósfera, hizo pensar a los militares que el edificio en cuestión podía tener varios miles de años. La secreta excursión de Armstrong y Aldrin a este hangar y naturalmente los 14 minutos de película jamás fueron difundidos.
Hi folks, and welcome back to the Revelations Network. This is Brother Jesse, and we're back again with another video. Today's video is titled Ancient Alien Moon City Discovered. This isn't really new news, it's kind of older news, but I thought I'd bring it to the channel just because some people haven't seen these pictures or this NASA leaked video that came out a few years back. But anyway, I thought I'd bring it to the channel. And people still talk about this video. It had to do with basically the discovery from astronauts of the moon city, the ancient ruins that are up on the moon. And of course NASA doesn't want you to know about that, so they basically claim that it doesn't exist, and basically nobody has taken pictures of anything, and this whole video is a hoax. Okay, well, we all know NASA doesn't tell the truth, and neither does our government. Anyway, moving on to this, supposedly when these videos were leaked, which was probably back in 2007, a guy by the name of William Rutledge, he was an astronaut on the covert Apollo 20 mission, which I will make some videos on that down the road. But anyway, cutting to the chase here, these videos were shot back then, and they're pretty amazing if you check them out. And then let's go to more of a current time. This little comment came from a former NASA employee. His name was Ken Johnson, and he worked for NASA. He worked for the Space Agency's Lunar Receiving Laboratory. And Johnson says NASA knows astronauts discovered ancient alien cities and the remains of amazing advanced machinery on the moon. Some of the technology can manipulate gravity. He says the agency ordered a cover-up and forced him to participate in it. Over the past 40 years, other scientists, engineers, and technicians have accused NASA of cover-ups and not telling the truth. The growing number of accusers' allegations range from hiding information about space objects to lying about the discovery of artifacts on the surface of the moon and Mars to denying the evidence of life reported back by the Viking lander during the mid-1970s. So as you can see, there's a lot of things NASA doesn't always tell us the truth about. But I want you to really check this video out because it's kind of cool. I think it is anyway, and you know for a fact there's stuff up there on the moon that you don't know about. I find it very ironic that there's been so much disinformation supposedly pushed out there from people trying to tell you that these are a scam, they're not real, yet you have other people who work for NASA telling you they are real. And it's just one of the many cover-ups of NASA and the elite, Illuminati, globalists, whatever you want to call them. They don't want you to know what's really on the moon. And basically what happened was our astronauts, they don't go back to the moon because they were told to stay off the moon. They were told that. And you can believe, that these are aliens or offspring of the fallen angels. That's what I believe. But believe whatever you want. But believe this, there is ancient relics up on the moon, and there's also other beings up on the moon as well. I mean, that's something that goes without saying. Armstrong was, from the Apollo missions, he was basically warned off the moon with the rest of the astronauts. But the covert mission of Apollo 20 happened in 1976, and like I said, I'll make a video of that down the road. But I thought you might want to see this video because it is pretty amazing for the most part. I think the saddest thing for me is that we have, the elite here who have all this technology. They have, probably gravitational information, and power information, where people wouldn't have to pay power bills anymore or pay for gasoline. They have anti-gravitational stuff, and yet they are so selfish they won't share it with anyone, and that's how they are. The Illuminati and the world governments, they want all this information for themselves, and they're not going to share it with the public. They're not going to share it with me, and they're not going to share it with you. So you get constant disinformation from places like CNN, ABC, Fox News. It doesn't matter which one, because they all work for the same umbrella. They all work for the man and the elite, and they give you information that isn't always the truth, just like NASA doesn't tell you always the truth. But you have to decide for yourself if you're going to believe what the mainstream media always tells you and take that end as the truth or not. It's pretty sad, because that's why a lot of us brothers and sisters here on YouTube bring you this information, because the mainstream media will not bring it to you. They're too busy sending you on information about Britney Spears or Katy Perry, so that'll keep you busy and away from what they're really doing. Anyway, I thought this was a very important video, and I know some people have seen this video before, but others haven't, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
That was pretty interesting. I should mention in passing, actually, we mentioned 1 Enoch 18 before, and the mountains under Antarctica. Now, these mountains actually aren't visible except through satellites who have been taking images through the ice. They have the ability to penetrate the ice and map what's underneath. That's when they saw this mountain range near the Ron ice shelf, which had 7 peaks, 3 running east, 3 running south, and a central one in the middle, which seems to match the description in 1 Enoch 18 about the range where the angels were imprisoned. And that's why the claim has surfaced recently that's actually now in Antarctica. Now, from the videos we just saw, I guess the question that I leave you with at the end of all of it is, did the angels and their wives once live on the moon? Were the angels preppers? Did they build edifices on the moon for when God was going to act in anger to destroy the world that they had now themselves irreparably corrupted? And who shot down those buildings? Did God send some band of celestial warriors to break apart the angelic places of escape and draw them back to the earth? Or did he banish them to still more distant worlds, because the moon was still too close to the earth and the world of man, from which the angels had now been banished? We're going to finish up this segment with another video which sort of talks about giants that are still alive today, only they're living in underground caverns. The story relates to Malta, an island in the Mediterranean, where a group of children once went with their teachers. They went into a bunch of tunnels in a place called the Hypogeum there, and they never came back. But there are stories from those who have gone into those tunnels that a kind of race of giants lives deep down there underground. And somebody does tell a story of having seen these giants, and they've come back to tell that story. So let's have a look at that video now.
Malta is a chain of islands in the middle of the Mediterranean. Before gaining independence in times of war, because of its strategic location, it has changed hands from the Phoenicians to the Romans to the Normans to the British. But before it was drawn into World War II, it was the setting for a tragedy which drew worldwide attention when a class of 4th grade students and teachers were swallowed alive in the bowels of the earth, never to be seen again. The first people to disappear from Malta was Neolithic man, who migrated from the island of Sicily 5,000 years before Christ. After hunting the indigenous pygmy hippos and pygmy elephants to the point of extinction, they established a prehistoric dynasty lasting nearly 3 millennia, erecting temples made of blocks quarried from local sandstone, many of which remain standing today. Then they vanished without a trace, as if the victim of some invading army which had no intention of settling the land. The sandstone substrate also made it easy for them to tunnel underground. The tiny islands cover only 122 square miles, and the land is completely honeycombed with subterranean passages. In 1902, in the small Maltese town of Paola, 2 laborers were digging a well on Main Street. One of them fell into a cavern, resulting in the discovery of an underground complex of chambers and tunnels. This entrance was named after the Main Street and is called the Hypogeum of Halsaflienti. Hypogeum is Latin for underground construction. In 1937, when Adolf Hitler's greatest problem was how to pay for the Autobahn, a group of 30 Maltese school children, along with 2 teachers and 1 tour guide, took a field trip to the Hypogeum. Part of their tour was a short descent by rope to the 3rd sub-level. Beyond that chamber, the passages branch out in the complexity of a maze. One wrong turn, and the group sealed its fate, unable to find its way back to the entrance. Many of the older houses on the island have a door inside, opening directly into the catacombs. When grieving mothers gathered at the Hypogeum, they claimed to hear the distant screams of children. This was confirmed by those homeowners with private access to the tunnels, who also reported the echoes of crying youngsters, which lasted days. This ends the story, exactly as reported in the August 1940 issue of National Geographic magazine. 1 year before this horrific incident, the same chamber from which the children were to disappear was explored by Lois Jessup, an Englishwoman who worked as a secretary at the British Embassy in the capital. She also published an account of her tour in the Journal of Borderland Research. Lois also climbed down the rope, but her tour guide was not willing to follow. In those days, the way was not lit by electric light, nor flashlights, nor torches. Each tourist was expected to carry their own candle. With only half a candle left, Lois moved forward until she found herself on a ledge and could walk no further. The chasm between her and the sandstone wall opposite seemed bottomless, but she only had enough light to see 50 feet down. She was intrigued to see a similar ledge on the opposite wall, about 30 feet below the projection on which she stood. Then she was spellbound as she observed 20 persons emerge from the darkness, walking single file on the narrow ledge below. She judged their height to be more than 3 times that of a full-grown man. They were taking long strides and walking very slowly. These giants began to notice her presence, and one by one they stopped and lifted their heads to stare at Ms. Jessup. Just then she felt hot wax searing her hand. She dropped her candle and was immediately plunged into total darkness. If she had not tied the rope around her waist, if she had not the presence of mind to call up to her guide, Joseph, to pull her back, she may well have fallen into the cold air of the chasm.
Now, I suppose the problem with these giants is that they are giants. They have large appetite and they're living underground, so I suppose there's not an awful lot for them to eat down there. So it would stand to reason that if any group of children were to wander down there, they would likely become a good stock of food for these giants. And giants in the ancient world were also often reported to be cannibals, who did suffer always from the problem of finding enough food to meet their appetites. Anyway, that's enough for today. We might have some time for questions and other things today, or perhaps just enjoy a slightly shorter session for a change. Next week will be part 3 on giants. We're going to continue the series, and the focus is more going to be on the fallen angels and what became of them after their transgression, more than the giants themselves, because that feeds into the biblical narrative too of Judgment Day, and why did God let them stay alive until the flood? Why didn't he just get rid of them straight away? And I think it was to teach them what their actions finally would result in, how mankind was corrupted from his early simplistic, sort of innocent life to the kind of life we live now, where all kinds of sins proliferate and the world doesn't spend any of its time thinking about God at all. And so they're guilty of causing mankind to drift in that direction. So that's next week. I hope you'll join us there. There's a few more videos as well, and it's going to be interesting and relevant, and hope to see you there. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.